For 100 years, the Art Theater has been a vital part of Champaign-Urbana's movie experience, from the silent films of 1913 to the latest indie film in 2013. This beloved movie theater has been the place where countless generations of moviegoers have gone to see the best in filmmaking. On this edition of Art Now, we'll celebrate the centennial of the Art Theater and learn more about its history, its current state, and its future.
Hi, welcome to Art Now, a program where we talk to artists whose work is part of our community. I'm Pat Sammann, and I'll be your host. We're coming to you today from the Art Theater in Champaign, and we're here to talk about the centennial anniversary of the theater, which will be celebrated on Tuesday, November 12th this year. Our guests today are Perry Morris, past president of the Champaign County Historical Society and the Champaign County Genealogy Society, Luke Boyce, co-owner and creative director of the local film production company Shatterglass Studios, Kara Day from Champaign Movie Makers, a group that connects Central Illinois filmmakers, actors, and artists with each other to make independent films, and Austin McCann, general manager of the Art. Thank you all for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. Perry, you and co-authors Joseph Muskin and Audrey Wells have just written a book about the history of the art entitled The Art Theater, Playing Movies for 100 Years. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a brief run through the history of the theater?
Sure. It's got quite an interesting history. Some people probably already know about its connection to Roger Ebert, mm-hmm. but it's also got a similar connection to Michael Wiese and to Frederick Marx. But we're going to basically follow the art down through its history from the time it was built in 1913. Mm-hmm. Local businessman Isaac Kuhn helped finance the building, and it was the brainchild of Bert Cooper, who I found some more things out about him, but he's still somewhat of a mystery. Interesting guy, but very happy that he had the dream and he fulfilled it here. And then it goes on to Pyle, Charlie Pyle, that some people may have heard of. He was Red Grange's manager.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So we've got a connection to Charlie Pyle. He was a real entrepreneur. And after his era, we go to the Alger Brothers. Mm-hmm. They ran theaters in Champaign-Urbana and beyond for, like 30 years or so. They built the co-ed on campus, and they ran the Princess over in Urbana. There was a lot of interesting things during their era, but that was the time they were doing, the art mostly did like second runs and things like that, and there would be people like Gene Autry come and play along during the afternoon matinees on some of the westerns. It was kind of interesting. The Algers ended up getting to the point where they weren't really making money anymore in late 1958, mid-1958, and they decided to sell their theaters. A man named Louis Scher, he bought this theater and turned it into an art theater, a real art theater. It was part of his art theater guild. He ended up having something like 50 to 90 theaters all across the country. This is one of his early ones. He's a very interesting guy. He was very much interested in movie making himself. Mm-hmm. He actually made the stewardesses. He kind of moved from true art films into adult films. And one of the reasons he claimed that he did that was because his other theaters began showing art house movies. So in order to keep in the business, he changed his style. And one of the things he's known for too is the case that went to the Supreme Court, that I don't remember versus who, right. But it was where the justice said, "I know it when I see it," in defining pornography.
Right.
That was one of his cases. There was also a case based here that was locally that the theater was busted for showing Deep Throat. So that was,
Wow.
that was a few years ordeal that took to get through the trial, but it was acquitted. And after about 1958, Lou Scher, he sold out. He stopped making. Money dried up for him, probably because mostly about VCRs. You know, people could get it.
Makes sense.
And play it at home.
Right.
So the theater sat vacant for a little while, and a man named John Manley was interested in, had always kind of admired the architecture of the building, and he wasn't really a film buff, but he got interested in the building and decided to go for it.
Yeah.
So he bought it and recruited his college roommate Tom Angelica into help cleaning it up and getting it ready to. But Ron Epple, who's well known at the time in Champaign-Urbana as film programmer, did the programming for them. And he's probably the one that made it a big success at that time. He programmed films that brought people in and got it really established during that first year.
Right.
And eventually it went on to where just Tom was managing it, and he had a lot of issues with. It was a single screen, which in itself is its own, it has its own set of issues.
Well, yeah, there's so many multiplexes now.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Had to compete with those, and it being an art house, which doesn't actually bring in the droves of people that big blockbusters do.
Right.
And some of the multiplexes were also showing art house movies. So eventually, Tom got out, and Greg Boardman took over the theater, did a lot of remodeling to it. Well, not exactly remodeling, but upgrading of equipment. He was big on sound, and especially, and quality of projection. So he upgraded all of those things. So really brought it up to state of the art. And then after a few years, he got out, and Sanford Hess took over, continuing to run it. And that's about the time that the digital push came in. And Sanford was making money, but it wasn't, like hand over fist. And he was going to have to buy a digital projector if it was going to stay open. So that's when it kind of moved into the the co-op form. So it became the first co-op.
Okay. And that was in 2012, right?
2012.
Yeah. Okay. Now the art is now a co-op in which patrons can buy shares and become owners. What motivated? Well, we know what motivated that. I think it was what the new projector was $80,000.
That's the kind of medium amount for how much a DCP projector costs.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of part of the motivation for doing it, but I'm sure there are other benefits for having it being a co-op. So can anybody here just kind of address why it was a good thing to go to co-op?
Didn't want it to close.
Well, that's a good reason.
For the community.
I mean, I would say the thing that ends up being so valuable to people is the art really is an alternative to multiplexes in a lot of ways. And part of what it is the feeling of it being a community arts institution, something where the programming is actually done by somebody who lives in the community, who sees what the films do, sees how people respond, and where people can have a voice in what that theater is and what it's becoming. So a co-op is a really direct way of doing that, because you get the folks who are coming to see the film to be the owners of the business as well. So I'll have really interesting conversations with people who feel like they have a stake in this business that is even more the case than if they had just come here a lot as patrons or whatever.
Yeah. Now the co-op does have a board of directors, and Luke, you're a board member. Can you tell us a little bit about what role the board members play?
The board members are voted on by the owners, so we represent the ownership of the theater itself. Technically, we're a policy governance board. We monitor Austin and just in general the governance of the theater. But really more than that, I think the philosophical basis of the board is to really kind of vision the whole co-op, and what is a co-op, what is the theater, what is the future of the theater, and how can we get to certain points.
Right.
The board exists to make sure that the theater keeps running, and that the co-op model works, and that we can grow and evolve. So.
Right. Yeah, you did get a really good response, I think. How many members do you have now? You have any idea?
More than 1,300.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Austin, you're the general manager. What does that entail on a day-to-day basis?
A lot of people think that running a movie theater is a pretty easy job, and the way I'm determining this is, I get a lot of emails for people requesting films, and that's really the lifeblood of the theater, is what movies we get to play here. Right. People do like the experience of the art, but really, if we were showing just any old movie, I think people would be willing to forego the experience for another place. So, running a single-screen theater, you have a lot of constraints because our audience has a very specific taste. I have actually much less freedom to show films than I think a lot of people think. Like, you find some film and you think, oh, that'll be great, people will love that. Yeah. Not necessarily the case. So it's a lot of trying to figure out what our audience is wanting. And I do see the art as an institution which not only reflects the desires of the patrons, but is trying to be a kind of leading light for what an arts institution can be in a community. Right. So I do also try to experiment with things. So we've started new programs this year, like we've greatly, again, like not upgraded, not revamped, but expanded our late night programming. So 10 o'clocks on the weekends and sometimes during the week, we have these big, wild events here. Or we've been showing a lot of films and we'll have discussions afterwards. So it's a lot of that work, in addition to all of the kind of boring administrative work of like making sure we've paid our bills, making sure that staff is here, making sure we have popcorn, and those kinds of things. But really, the bulk of it is rooted in that question of how to do film programming, what to play here, and how we can get folks to come here to see those films.
Okay. Do you feel like having this in a 100-year-old building is a limitation or a good thing?
The 100-year-oldness of it is good insofar as it has a romantic historical nature to it. Right. There's disadvantages to being a single screen, but for me that's a bigger concern more than the fact that the building's 100 years old. It needs some work here and there, but in general it's in good shape, so we're happy with it.
Good. Okay. Kara, you're involved in the Champaign Movie Makers Group, which supports people who want to make independent films. Tell us a little bit about your group first.
We're a grassroots collective of independent filmmakers, and having an independent theater, like the art theater, where we can show our final product is incredible. It's one thing to watch a movie on your TV screen or your computer, but it's a whole nother thing to experience it with a group of 250 or some odd people. And when the audience sighs at something that maybe you missed, or there's a collective laugh at something, it's part of the lifeblood of the community. When I first moved here in '95, the theater was interesting. The seats had been salvaged from another theater that was on the wrong pitch.
This is like when it was new art, right?
Yeah. Right. And you had to plant your feet so you didn't slide out of the seat. But gradually, over time, with the changes with the new seats and with the new management and with the co-op, it's really become the heart of the community. I can't imagine a downtown without a movie theater. And for independent filmmakers, it's such an incredible opportunity to be able to show your movie and have a full house.
Yeah, well, and get feedback from your own community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've shown Leading Ladies and Heart Shot and Bedtime for Timmy, and some of the Up the Creek, which are sitcoms, and we've got the New Art Film Festival, and
Can you say a little bit more about the festival for people who aren't familiar with it?
Sure.
Sure.
The New York Film Festival is a festival of independent film, and it's curated by Jason Pankoki, and he's done an amazing amount of work to get that off the ground. It started out just showing movies on the side of buildings, but it really makes a difference being able to see it in the art theater.
The New Art Film Festival happens every April.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the month it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So be looking for it.
Kara's
go
mentioning
ahead.
about the seats made me think about something too.
Sure.
That was that really points out the love the community has for this theater.
Yeah, I would
As
still come, even though the seats.
Yeah, and even back then, it was a for-profit business back then, but people donated money to get these new seats that we've got now.
I actually was one of those
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah. No, that's true. Okay, Luke, your documentary about the Art Theater, The Art Lives, is going to be premiered at the Art on November 12th. What was your process for developing it?
No, I don't know if I had a process as much as I just met with Perry and Audrey and Joe and discussed, as they were developing the book, we kind of were also talking about who we could talk to, possible interviews, and so we worked on getting those interviews early on, and talking about what is the story of this theater. For a documentary, you still have to have a narrative. You still have to have something that's engaging. And so, I felt that the story was that, this is kind of the little theater that could. I mean, you don't really find theaters in America that have been a movie theater for 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, they've
Yeah.
changed, they've had different, they've brought in performances and things like that and had to change. But you don't find theaters like this that have consistently been a theater. And so, it was that little theater that could mentality. That's where the name The Art Lives comes from. Also, partly from the door in the back that has that graffitied on it. But I thought,
that's great.
It's a perfect title because here it is. And, we found a way to keep it going, the co-op model.
Yeah.
Right now there's so many theaters that are closing in America. I mean, independent film is somewhat, or at least the exhibition of independent film is kind of dying in a way, especially with things like Netflix, and you can watch a lot of it at home.
Right.
And so, we have something very special here. So, we wanted to just kind of celebrate that.
That's great. I'll be looking forward to seeing that.
Me too.
Okay.
One of the things I like about the art theater being a single screen, you don't get the sound bleed from an adjacent screen like you get in a multiplex.
Yeah.
One of the few benefits of that, yeah, for sure.
Well, I think in some ways it makes it seem more special because it's just that one that you're focused on.
Everybody who's
And
in the lobby
everybody's-
is there to see that movie,
Exactly,
right?
exactly, yeah. Okay, Austin, besides the premiere of Luke's documentary, what other activities will be going on for the Centennial?
So back in the spring, I was contacted by a chamber music ensemble who they compose and perform original scores to silent films called the Andrew Alden Ensemble.
Okay.
And so we brought them and they played their score to Nosferatu and we sold out the audience. And it was just a really amazing event. It was their best show on tour. It was my favorite event that we had last year. So I knew when we were having our 100th, it would be great to bring them back.
Yeah.
So on Tuesday, the night of our big event, which we're calling A Century of Cinema, celebrating 100 years at the Art Theater, we're going to have 3 different premieres. So we are premiering Luke's documentary. We are premiering the book that Perry was talking about earlier.
Right.
And we're premiering a work that we specially commissioned the Andrew Alden Ensemble to compose and perform, which is them playing along to a program of silent shorts from 1896, the earliest silent films, all the way through Buster Keaton, a really bizarre version of Alice in Wonderland from 1903, some more experimental films from the 60s, and a pretty funny, I think, intermissions segment. So
That sounds great.
they're going to be doing a full program, and that's at the end of the night. We're going to have food and drinks here, and people are going to get an opportunity to, meet other people who really love the art.
Yeah.
The next night, too, the ensemble are going to be playing their score to a really great film from 1932 called Vampire by Carl Dreyer, which is a kind of ahead of its time vampire film. And that's our kind of bonus event.
Yeah, that's great.
On that Wednesday. But the Tuesday is really going to be our blowout event with like all of this history about the art and all of these great people and all of this great art that people are going to be able to witness.
Sounds great. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, as the last question, as we start the next 100 years, what would each of you like to see happen with the art theater in the future? Any ideas?
More independent films.
I would really like to see somehow the space expand and offer more options. Preferably an option for some sort of food and beverage consumption, where maybe a cafe or something like that, where people could actually casually talk about the films that they see.
That would be a
I
good
think
idea.
the engagement needs to happen more.
Yeah. Perry, you have
Well,
any?
I want it to continue more prosperous than ever.
Okay.
And yeah, for me, I mean, I think one of my main goals is always building the significance of alternative cinema. So to the extent that we can really start to build large crowds for films that are less commercial, and that we see that those films are really having an impact on individuals and in the community. It's a little intangible, but you know, that would be a great thing to see in 100 years. Also more Martian attendance, I think.
There you go. Sounds good. Okay, thanks very much for you all being here today.
Thanks.
Okay, and thanks for watching Art Now. Our guests today have been Perry Morris, Luke Boyce, Kara Day, and Austin McCann. If you're interested in learning more about the Art Theater, visit their website at www.arttheater.coop. For more on Shatterglass Studios, go to shatterglassstudios.com. And for information on Champaign Movie Makers, see champaignmoviemakers.ning.com. To purchase the anniversary book, The Art Theater, go to www.cutheaterhistory.com.